My son had just celebrated closing a $12 million business deal when I called him. I only needed $3,500 for surgery that could save my life. He told me there wasn't any money for me. I accepted his decision without arguing, but what happened only a few days later left him standing in my doorway with anger in his eyes, and no idea that the balance of power had already changed. Welcome to Dad's True Revenge. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from because stories like this connect people from all over the world. If you've ever trusted the wrong person or wondered what family truly means, stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. My name is Daniel, and at 68, I never thought the hardest battle of my life would begin in a doctor's office that smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. The doctor folded his hands, looked me in the eyes, and quietly explained that I had cancer, but surgery could give me a real chance if I could find $30,500 soon. I nodded as if I were stronger than I felt, slipped the estimate into my coat pocket with trembling fingers, and walked into the cold afternoon air. There was only one person I believed could help without hesitation, yet a small voice inside me kept asking whether I really knew the son I had spent my whole life raising. I sat on a weathered bench outside the hospital for nearly an hour, turning the folded estimate over in my hands until the edges became soft. My son, Michael, had built a company from the ground up, and I had always been proud of him, even when success left him too busy to visit. I still remembered working double shifts so he could attend university without worrying about tuition, and I never once reminded him of those sacrifices. When I finally dialed his number, he answered with laughter in the background and voices celebrating around him. "Dad, make it quick," he said. "We just closed a $12 million deal." I swallowed the lump in my throat and explained the diagnosis as calmly as I could. For a brief moment, there was silence, and I wondered if that silence meant hope or something far worse. Michael sighed as though my words had interrupted an important meeting, instead of his father's fight for survival. "Dad, everything is tied up right now," he said. "The business comes first, and I can't just pull out money because of an emergency." His voice stayed polite, but it carried the distance of a stranger rather than a son. I stared at the cracked pavement beneath my shoes, gripping the phone until my knuckles turned white. I told him I only needed $3,500 and promised I would repay every dollar if I lived long enough. He answered with another excuse before ending the call with, "I hope you understand." The line went dead, and the world suddenly felt quieter than I had ever known. At that moment, I realized the pain inside my chest had little to do with cancer. I drove home without turning on the radio, letting the silence fill every corner of the car. The small house looked exactly as it always had, yet it somehow felt emptier when I stepped inside and placed the surgery estimate on the kitchen table. I poured myself a cup of tea, but it had gone cold before I remembered to take the first sip. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, noticed the lights on and stopped by with fresh bread, smiling kindly until she saw my face. I told her only that I had received difficult news and would manage somehow because I had no desire to burden anyone else. She squeezed my shoulder without asking questions, and that simple gesture almost broke me. Then, just before sunset, I heard a soft knock at the front door that I wasn't expecting. When I opened the door, my daughter Emily stood there wearing her old denim jacket, her eyes already red as though she had cried on the drive over. She worked 2 jobs just to pay rent, and I knew every extra dollar mattered to her, so I forced a smile and told her everything was under control. She quietly stepped inside, sat beside me at the kitchen table, and listened without interrupting while I explained the diagnosis and my conversation with Michael. She reached into her worn handbag and placed a plain envelope between us with hands that trembled slightly. "Dad," she whispered, "it's only $2,000, but I've been saving it for years. Right now you need it more than I do." I looked at the envelope, unable to speak, because I knew accepting it would change our family forever. My hands shook as I pushed the envelope back toward Emily, but she gently slid it into my lap again. "Please don't make me argue with you," she said with a small smile that could not hide the worry in her eyes. I knew how many extra shifts she had worked to save that money, skipping holidays and repairing old clothes instead of buying new ones. Accepting it felt like taking part of her future, yet refusing it meant risking my own. I still remember the warmth of her hand resting on mine as she quietly said, "You spent your whole life protecting me. Let me protect you now." At that moment, I realized that true wealth had never been measured by bank accounts, but another difficult decision still waited. The next morning I visited the hospital again with Emily beside me, carrying the envelope as though it contained something priceless. The billing clerk patiently explained that I still needed to cover the remaining amount before the surgery could be scheduled. Emily immediately offered to pick up even more overtime, despite the exhaustion already visible on her face. I told her I could never allow that because she had already sacrificed enough. As we walked through the hospital corridor, I noticed an elderly volunteer greeting every patient with the same gentle kindness, reminding me that compassion often comes from people who have the least to give. I believed I would have to sell the last valuable things I owned, but fate had already begun moving in a direction I could not yet see. That afternoon, I unlocked an old wooden chest in my bedroom, where I kept the few possessions that still carried memories of my late wife. Inside lay her wedding ring, my father's pocket watch, and a small collection of medals from my years of service. Each item held a piece of my life, yet none of them felt as valuable as the chance to see another sunrise. Emily begged me not to sell them, but I quietly explained that memories live in the heart, not inside objects. As we sorted through everything, an old photograph slipped onto the floor. It showed Michael and Emily as children, smiling while sitting on my shoulders at the county fair. I stared at that picture much longer than I should have, because something about it suddenly refused to leave my mind. The photograph reminded me of a promise I had made to both of my children after their mother passed away. I had promised that no matter how hard life became, our family would always stand together. Looking at Michael's smiling face in that faded picture, I struggled to understand where that promise had been broken. Emily quietly placed the photograph back into the box without saying a word, as though she knew my heart was already carrying enough weight. Before leaving for work, she hugged me tighter than usual and asked me to answer every phone call, no matter who it was. I nodded, thinking she was simply worried about my health. I had no idea that someone else had just learned about my diagnosis and was preparing to step into our lives. Early the next evening, my telephone rang from an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another advertisement, but something urged me to answer. A calm voice introduced herself as Laura, an assistant from Michael's company, and she sounded nervous before she even explained why she was calling. She apologized for contacting me directly and asked if we could meet somewhere private because she believed there was something important I deserved to know. She refused to discuss it over the phone, saying only that she had witnessed a conversation she could no longer keep to herself. After we agreed to meet the following morning at a quiet cafe near the hospital, I placed the phone down slowly. For the first time since my diagnosis, I sensed that the story I had been told was not the whole truth. The next morning, I arrived at the small cafe 15 minutes early, more out of habit than confidence. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room, but I barely noticed it as I watched the door. Laura walked in carrying a thin folder, her expression uneasy, and after introducing herself, she apologized for what she was about to tell me. She explained that she had overheard my call with Michael because he had answered it on speaker during a meeting celebration. When the call ended, one executive had quietly suggested the company help with my surgery. Michael had laughed, closed his laptop, and said, "If I keep rescuing my father, he'll never stop depending on me." Hearing those words felt colder than the doctor's diagnosis. Yet Laura wasn't finished. Laura slowly opened the folder and slid a single document across the table. It listed the bonuses awarded after the company's record-breaking deal, and beside Michael's name was an amount so large I had to read it twice before believing it. He had received enough money to cover my surgery many times over without noticing the difference. Laura lowered her voice and admitted she could not sleep after hearing him refuse me because she had watched her own father die years earlier while waiting for treatment. She said she was risking her position by meeting me, but her conscience mattered more than her job. I thanked her with tears I could no longer hide, then folded the paper carefully into my pocket, already wondering whether Michael knew the truth was beginning to surface. I walked through the nearby park before returning home, needing time to quiet the storm inside me. Every step brought back another memory of Michael as a little boy running toward me after school, proudly holding up drawings he wanted only his father to see. I asked myself the question that every parent fears. Had success changed him, or had I simply refused to notice who he was becoming? By the time I reached my front gate, I had made one decision with complete certainty. I would never confront him in anger or beg for another dollar. If he chose money over family, then he would have to live with that choice on his own. What I did not know was that someone inside our family had already contacted him. That evening, Emily stopped by after work carrying groceries she could barely afford, insisting that we share dinner together. We laughed for the first time in days while making simple soup, and for a brief moment the house felt like home again. As we cleared the table, her phone buzzed with a message. She glanced at the screen and the color drained from her face before she quickly locked it. I gently asked if everything was all right, but she forced a smile and claimed it was nothing important. Her hands, however, continued to tremble as she washed the dishes. I chose not to press her because everyone deserves a moment to gather their thoughts, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that Michael had finally learned what Emily had done. The following afternoon, a black luxury SUV pulled into my driveway, its polished paint reflecting the afternoon sun like a mirror. I looked through the living room window and immediately recognized Michael stepping out in an expensive suit, his jaw tight with anger instead of concern. He didn't knock politely. He pushed the door open after a single sharp rap and demanded to know why Emily had been giving away money that belonged to her future. Emily stood between us without saying a word, her shoulders tense but unafraid. I remained seated in my old armchair, watching my son carefully because for the first time in years I could see something unfamiliar behind his confidence. It wasn't guilt. It was fear, and I was finally about to learn exactly what he was afraid of. Michael pointed at the envelope still resting on the kitchen table, as though it were evidence of a crime. Emily had no right to interfere, he said, his voice rising with every sentence. Emily calmly reminded him that I needed surgery, not another lecture about financial planning. He dismissed her words and insisted that she was being emotional, while he was simply making practical decisions. I watched the exchange in silence, noticing how quickly he avoided looking directly at me. Then I quietly asked him one question. If the money wasn't the problem, what was? The room fell completely still. His confident expression cracked for just a second before he looked away. That tiny hesitation told me more than any explanation ever could. But someone else was about to expose what he refused to admit. Before Michael could answer, another knock echoed through the house. Mrs. Carter stepped inside carrying a casserole dish she had promised to bring earlier, then immediately sensed the tension filling the room. She apologized for interrupting, but as she turned to leave, Michael muttered that everyone seemed determined to make him look like the villain. Mrs. Carter stopped, looked at him with quiet disappointment, and said, "A parent's greatest hope is never money. It's knowing their children will stand beside them when life becomes difficult." No one spoke after that. Michael folded his arms, pretending her words meant nothing, yet his face tightened as though they had struck a place he had been trying to ignore. Then his phone began ringing repeatedly, and the caller's name seemed to unsettle him even more. Michael stepped outside to answer the call, believing Emily and I could not hear him through the open kitchen window. His voice was low at first, but frustration quickly replaced caution. "I told you not to contact him," he snapped before pausing to listen. My heart skipped a beat because those words could only mean one thing. Someone had acted without his permission. When he returned inside, he claimed it had been a routine business call, yet he could not stop glancing toward the front door as though expecting another visitor. I remembered Laura's warning that she had risked everything by telling me the truth. At that moment, I realized Michael was no longer trying to protect his money. He was trying to protect something far more valuable than dollars. That evening, I unfolded the document Laura had given me and read every line again beneath the soft light above my dining table. The figures no longer mattered as much as the message hidden behind them. Michael had not refused because he lacked the ability to help. He had refused because he believed saying yes would weaken his image as a hard businessman. I looked across the table at Emily, who quietly mended a loose button on my old coat without being asked. The contrast between my children could not have been clearer. One guarded a reputation, the other guarded her father. I slipped the document back into its envelope, already knowing it would soon become important in a way Michael had never imagined. The next morning, my surgeon's office called with unexpected news. A charitable medical foundation had reviewed my case after receiving an anonymous recommendation and agreed to cover the remaining cost of my operation. Relief washed over me, but so did curiosity because no name had been attached to the referral. Emily smiled through tears, thanking God for the kindness of strangers, while I quietly wondered whether the mystery reached closer to home than either of us realized. Just as we finished the call, another message appeared on my phone from Laura. It contained only one sentence. "Your son has discovered what I told you, and he's planning something before your surgery." I read the words twice, feeling a chill despite the warm morning sunlight, because I knew the real confrontation had not yet begun. The morning of my surgery arrived with a quiet stillness that made every sound seem louder than usual. Emily sat beside me in the waiting room, holding a paper cup of untouched coffee while gently squeezing my shoulder whenever my thoughts drifted. Just before the nurses called my name, Michael walked through the hospital doors carrying an expensive bouquet of flowers and wearing the same confident smile he used for business meetings. He spoke loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, telling people he had been supporting me from the very beginning. I looked at him without anger because the truth no longer needed my voice to survive. Then Laura appeared at the end of the corridor, carrying something in her hands that Michael recognized immediately, and the color slowly disappeared from his face. Laura approached us calmly and handed me a sealed envelope before looking directly at Michael. "This belongs to your father," she said, her voice steady despite the tension surrounding us. Inside were printed copies of company messages confirming that several executives had offered to create a fund for my surgery, only for Michael to reject every suggestion himself. One message stood out more than the rest. It read, "Personal matters must never interfere with business image." Emily quietly wiped away a tear while I folded the papers without saying a word. Michael reached for the envelope, insisting the messages lacked context, but I simply placed them back inside. The nurses called my name again, and as I stood, I realized I no longer needed an explanation from the son I once believed I knew. The surgery lasted several hours, and when I finally opened my eyes, the first face I saw was Emily's. She looked exhausted, her hair untidy from waiting all day, yet the relief in her smile warmed the room more than the afternoon sunlight. The surgeon told me the operation had gone well and that my recovery would take time, but the hardest part was finally behind me. Michael had left the hospital before I woke, leaving only the bouquet he had brought earlier. Days later, I asked a nurse to donate the flowers to another patient because kindness means little when it arrives only after witnesses are watching. Some stories deserve to be heard, and this one was only beginning to reveal its deepest lesson. A few weeks after returning home, I invited both of my children to dinner. The table looked simple, with homemade soup, fresh bread, and the old family photograph resting beside my plate. After we finished eating, I thanked Michael for coming before quietly sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a revised copy of my will. I explained that my estate would now be divided according to love shown through actions rather than expectations built on blood alone. Emily looked down, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation, but Michael's expression hardened as he realized the consequences of his own choices. I told him I was not punishing him. I was simply honoring the child who had stood beside me when I believed I might not live to see another season. Several months later, my strength slowly returned, and with it came a peace I never expected to find. Michael eventually wrote me a long letter admitting that success had become more important than compassion, though rebuilding trust would take far longer than writing apologies. I chose to forgive him because forgiveness frees the heart, but forgiveness does not erase consequences. Emily never asked for recognition, yet she became the greatest blessing of my later years simply by loving me without conditions. I still keep her empty envelope in my desk drawer as a reminder that sacrifice is measured by what we are willing to give, not by what we have. Tell me honestly, what would you have done if you were in my place? Family is not proven by words, it is proven when someone needs you most. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. God bless you, and thank you for watching.